Gave birth in my best friend's car, now her husband blames me for destroying it and they won't talk to me. Almost 2 weeks ago, when I was nearly 38 weeks pregnant, my partner left for the afternoon to help her brother. We were both totally fine with it. She was only about an hour and a half away, and neither of us ever imagined what was about to happen. My friend Alice offered to come over and spend the day with me so I wouldn't be alone, and honestly, her company was such a comfort. We lounged around, watched movies, and just hung out. I was uncomfortable the entire time, but I'd been feeling like that for a while, so I didn't think too much about it. It never crossed my mind that I could actually be going into labor. Somehow, I thought I'd know when it was really happening. Eventually, reality hit. This was the real deal. I called my wife, and we both briefly considered waiting for her to get home, but things started escalating quickly, and I asked Alice if she could please drive me to the hospital. She agreed, and we set off, but we didn't even make it to the hospital. My daughter was born right there in Alice's, well, technically her husband's, car. Thankfully, both the baby and I came out of it all right. There were some complications for me, but everything's okay now. Our baby is absolutely perfect, and while my wife has had a hard time coping with missing her birth, we're both over the moon about our tiny human and focusing on her. But things have become very messy with Alice and her husband, and I honestly don't know how to fix it. A couple of days after everything happened, I sent Alice a heartfelt message, thanking her for everything she'd done. I told her, lightheartedly but sincerely, to please send me a bill for getting the car cleaned. She didn't reply for a while and eventually just liked the message. Every other message I sent after that went unanswered, until her husband finally wrote to me, telling me not to contact Alice and congratulating me on the baby, but also thanking me for fucking up his car. It felt like a punch in the gut. This whole situation keeps running through my mind, even though I know my priority is my new little family right now. It's just such a shock because Alice has never acted like this with me before. I was never particularly close with her husband. He's got a way of talking to her I don't love, but we were always friendly. I don't know what to do. Did I traumatize Alice so much that I should leave her alone? Should I keep trying to reach out? I am so genuinely grateful for what she did that day, and it feels awful not being able to express that. The truth is, I know I'm obsessing over this situation more than I should, but it's hard to just let go. There are a million possible reasons Alice hasn't replied, and while there's no benefit in continuing to speculate or chase her down, especially if her husband is monitoring her messages and clearly so angry, it's hard not to want closure. Right now, I'm doing my best to concentrate on the baby and savoring these first moments with her, but the whole thing with Alice is still gnawing at me. I think I'll give it one more try, reach out to her one more time, and if I still get nothing back, I guess I'll have to let it go. But it honestly just sucks. I'm not Alice's husband's biggest fan, and this situation hasn't helped. She would never say a bad word against him, but I can't help but think about that poor car. Honestly, it's probably a disaster. Replace the seat level mess. All I've tried to do is make things right by offering to pay for any and all damage. Looking back, I definitely should have just called an ambulance. Next time, that's what I'll do. EMS certainly wouldn't care about the mess, and they're trained for this sort of thing. Lesson learned. The realization that the car might even be considered totaled makes me feel sick. I truly hadn't considered how quickly things would move, or just how many dumb assumptions we made about labor. I always imagined I'd get more warning, more time for my partner to make it back. Clearly, I was wrong. For the record, this all happened in Belgium. I want to make it clear that we always intended to pay Alice and her husband back for the damage caused. I'm very aware I made a huge mess of their car. I'm grateful for any advice I get, and I've gotten plenty of helpful insights already. My plan now is to try to reach Alice again, but maybe not by text this time. Maybe I'll go through a mutual friend, maybe I'll try to meet up with her in person. I'm not sure yet, but I am determined to check in on her in some way. Just recently, I reached out to Alice again and apologized once more, for everything, both the state of their car and for any trauma I might have caused. I reaffirmed that I want to pay for any damage, no matter the cost, and even offered to find professionals or try sorting everything out myself, or to rent them a replacement if they want. Even though I feel my intention was clear in my very first message, I want to make absolutely sure there are no doubts. And just so it's understood, I've always been totally serious and sincere about paying for the damages. I've never joked about making things right. I'm still hoping this will be enough to show just how grateful I am, and how eager I am to fix what I can. Update 1. A few days ago, I saw Alice again. She appeared at our house completely unexpectedly, ironically, just after I'd left, so my wife had to call me home. This was after she had blocked me, and I just couldn't believe she was really there. The moment I saw her, I was so overwhelmed with happiness that I immediately started bawling, and she did too. We both apologized right away. There was just so much emotion between us. We ended up having this long, cathartic conversation. Everything that had happened was a lot for her, which I absolutely understand, and she told me she was struggling to process all of it. Initially, she didn't even feel upset with me specifically, but her husband, who's honestly never been our biggest fan, was furious about the whole situation, especially about what happened to his car. Don't get me wrong, I completely get why he'd be upset about the car. I'd be upset too. I just really wish our communication had been better, or at the very least, different. He was apparently fuming that we hadn't reached out sooner after the baby was born and that my first message to them wasn't more apologetic. Over the weeks, I learned that Alice began to feel angry at me and my wife, not because she felt that herself, but because her husband convinced her to, and because my continued messaging was just too much for her in that moment. When things went quiet for a while, though, she realized she wasn't actually upset with me but with the situation as a whole. She even told her husband to stop bringing it up because she was sick of it. We both agreed we just wanted to be okay with each other again. She was honest, she'd have to rebuild things slowly, mostly because of her husband, but we shared that hope. I apologized again for everything, for not handling things differently from the start. Then, she actually cracked a little joke about how proud she was to be such a big part of my baby's birth story. Oddly, that meant everything to me. It gave me more relief than anything else she said. I really hope Alice will be okay. As for her husband, well, I don't love the guy, but there's not much more I can do besides remain her friend. Thankfully, the car wasn't totaled. I'd worked myself up thinking it was, but people pointed out I was overreacting. Only the front seat where I'd been sitting was really messed up, and, TMI, my sweatpants took most of the worst of it. The car was already cleaned and fixed well before Alice came to visit again. He's got it back, we repaid him for everything, though he apparently doesn't like driving it much anymore. That's about all there is. My wife, our baby, and I are all doing okay. Our little one is already a month old, which feels surreal. I did realize I'm holding onto some trauma from the whole birth ordeal. It really started to hit me once I stopped obsessing over Alice and her situation. I'm planning to work on that, for my family and myself. This whole chaotic experience taught me a lot about how I handle things, what I could have done differently, and how important the people around me are. I'll focus on what matters now, my family, and being a better friend wherever possible. Update 2. I didn't think I'd be back with anything worth saying, but Belgium had other plans, apparently. We went to register our daughter and of course nothing about this birth could just be straightforward. Because she wasn't born in a hospital, the clerk at the Gemientihuis needed a sworn witness statement and something official to note the location. I had Alice listed as the witness already, so I messaged her asking if she felt up to coming with us. She said yes right away. I don't know what I expected, but definitely not the clerk squinting at her screen, making a soft hum sound I'll hear in my nightmares, and then asking, very pleasantly, so, which street and vehicle? She literally typed in a vehicle, street name, into the place of birth line, and then asked for the license plate for precision. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again, because there is a real government document somewhere that immortalizes my daughter as being born in a vehicle and links it to a plate number that belongs to a man who still doesn't like driving that car anymore. I can't explain why that undid me, but it did. The clerk stamped the form like this happens every Tuesday and handed us a printed copy with a little smile like, voila, your very Belgian baby. On the way out, Alice asked if we could stop by the bathroom. She came back a minute later looking a bit too composed, like the way you hold your face together when your hands are shaking. Outside, in that silly little courtyard with the bike racks, she told me she's pregnant. Not far along, but enough to make the puzzle pieces click in my head about why all of this hit her so hard. She hadn't told her husband yet. She was terrified of how he'd react and, this part broke my heart, terrified of the idea of birth after being in a car with me when mine kicked into gear like a horror movie. I hugged her, promised we'd help as much as she wanted, as little as she wanted, and then we both went home and pretended to be normal people for the afternoon. That lasted about 14 hours. Just after midnight my phone lit up with Alice's name. She was at a late-night pharmacy, crying, because she'd told him and he'd stormed out and she didn't want to be alone with the silence that came after the fight. My wife was halfway into her coat before I'd even said yes, of course, come here. Alice arrived with a tote bag in the worst attempt at a brave smile I've ever seen. She held my daughter and finally stopped shaking. At some point in the dawnish gray she dozed off on our couch with the baby snoring on her chest and my wife made ridiculous amounts of toast for everyone like toast was a solution. The morning wasn't quiet for long. Her husband showed up at our door, no yelling, just this brittle, wired energy that filled the hallway. I told him she was here and safe. He said he wanted her to come home. She said she would, after she'd seen a midwife with me. He didn't like that. He didn't like a lot of things, honestly, including that he could see our baby behind me, which weirdly softened his face like someone had loosened a knot in a rope. He stepped into the living room and just looked. She's tiny, he said, and he said it so small himself that I almost didn't hear it. He apologized, awkwardly, like the words didn't know how to stand up, in my direction for the text he sent me weeks ago. He said the car smells fine now, which I guess was his way of saying truce. I can work with that. He also brought a form from his insurer asking me to sign that I wouldn't hold them liable for anything medical about the birth since it happened in his vehicle. I told him I would run it by our insurer and our midwife first because I'm not signing anything with a 2-week-old on one shoulder and jam on my other hand. He looked irritated, then annoyed at himself for looking irritated, then handed me his pen anyway like that might help. We settled on a complicated adult thing called later. After he left, Alice told us the rest. The car stuff had been their money stress wrapped in leather upholstery, a vacation they'd planned, savings that got eaten by a new seat and a deep clean. His pride about keeping something nice, all of that stacking on top of him being scared out of his mind in a way he doesn't know how to name. He did not handle that fear well. That doesn't make it okay. It just makes more sense than the cartoon villain version I built in my head at 3 a.m. I went with her to see a Verturao that afternoon. Sitting in the waiting room with a sleeping newborn while your best friend fills in a form about her own pregnancy does something strange to your chest. When the midwife asked if there was anything that might make this pregnancy complex, Alice said, very calmly, I saw a birth happen in a car and now everything scares me, and I watched this woman's whole posture shift into steady, competent kindness. She laid out a plan with steps and check-ins and numbers to call at 2 a.m. It felt like someone turned the lights on in a room we didn't know we'd been sitting in the dark. There was one more surreal detail, because why not? The local paper did a tiny human interest blip about baby born en route, thanks to the clerk tipping them off to the stats, and blurred out every single identifying thing but included the line about the place of birth being in a vehicle with the street name. No one who didn't already know could know, but everyone who did know laughed themselves silly. A seat upholstery place messaged me like a used car fairy godmother offering to sponsor a fresh interior for publicity and a photo of the baby. I said no to the photo, yes to passing along their number, and spent the rest of the day picturing my daughter modeling leather. I told Alice, and she actually giggled for the first time in a long time. She said if anyone's going to get seats out of this, it better be me for my couch, which has now been christened with baby milk at least 6 different ways. I'm not going to pretend everything is magically fixed. Alice went home that evening with a follow-up midwife appointment on her calendar and our guest room key in her pocket. Her husband texted me a strangely formal, almost old-fashioned message later, thanking us for accommodating her and reiterating the insurance thing at our earliest convenience. I took a picture of the certificate line that says in a vehicle, street, and sent it to my brother with the caption our kid is legally a car, then immediately deleted it because that's not a joke that ages well. My wife stuck the extra copy in a drawer and kissed the top of our daughter's ridiculous little head and said, we'll tell her one day. We're all a bit changed. Alice asked if she could come to a baby class with me next week to desensitize her brain, her words, and my wife is already building a spreadsheet because of course she is. I keep catching myself looking at the street outside our window and thinking about how fast things become stories, and how many boring, practical, not at all story-like steps it takes to make sure the people we love are okay after the wild part ends. If you're wondering, no, I still don't love the husband, but he stood in my hallway and said sorry to his own feet, and that's more than I ever expected to get. Also, the certificate is so absurdly official that it looped back around to comforting. Something as rigid as a government form made room for the weird way my daughter arrived. So maybe the rest of us can, too. Update 3. The baby class was in a church hall with those varnished floors that look sticky even when they're clean and a line of prams like a polite little traffic jam. Alice walked in holding herself together like origami. I brought the baby because that was the whole point, exposure therapy, tiny version, and my wife brought a folder, because of course she did, like the class might pop quiz us on nappies. The instructor had that calm, bouncy energy of someone who can talk about mucus plugs without blinking. She gave us a soft smile, clocked the newborn, and did not make it weird. It got weird on its own. Halfway through the section where you practice labor positions with a featherweight doll and a wobble cushion, someone outside laid on their horn and a motorbike did that tunnel reverb thing and I felt Alice stiffen. She didn't bolt. She breathed like the midwife showed her, counting on her fingers, eyes on the floorboards like they could anchor her, and I watched color come back into her face in real time. The instructor clocked it too and pivoted the demo into what to do if baby has other ideas about where to arrive, and produced, I swear, a laminated sheet actually titled Unexpected Places. Taxi, bathroom, living room, car, she chirped, and then she looked right at Alice and said, and you did it. That's data, not doom. I almost kissed her. After class, we went for fries because it felt like we'd earned salt and mayonnaise. Alice told me she'd told her husband she wanted me in the delivery room if the rules allowed it, or at least on call, and I could practically hear the tectonic plates under our neighborhood judder. He'd said we'll talk, which in his vocabulary is the opposite of a no. Progress looks so stupid and so mundane sometimes you nearly miss it. Insurance attempted a plot twist while I was deep in baby sock purgatory. A man with a voice like a photocopier called asking me to record a simple confirmation that I chose to travel by private vehicle knowing labor had begun, which would streamline resolution. I said we were corresponding via email through our insurer and midwife, and he did the long sigh of a man who wanted a checkbox and got a spine instead. An hour later my inbox pinged with a much gentler email ceasing approximately 9 people and an attachment titled Amicable Arrangement, which is Belgian for no one's at fault if we all agree this is boring now. I forwarded it to my wife like a child presenting a worm they found. Behold, a thing. Alice's husband texted me that evening a single thank you and a photo of the car with new, very wipeable seat covers, which is the closest he has come to poetry. And then Belgium really out-Belgiumed itself. The commune invited us to something called a Geboortboom. Apparently the neighborhood plants a tree once a year with tags for all the babies born, so they can grow up visiting their leaf on a branch like tiny druids. The invite had our daughter's name and, under place of birth, baldly, in Een Voortjewig, street. We went because how do you turn down a municipal tree? An alderwoman with immaculate hair read names off a little podium and tried not to giggle when she hit ours. People clapped the same amount for everyone, and a scout group with neckerchiefs tied ribbons while toddlers tried to steal the spade. Alice came, because of course she did. She stood next to me while the alderwoman mispronounced my wife's surname and whispered that she had her first ultrasound the next morning and did I want to come. I said yes faster than I could think. Her husband showed up too, 10 minutes late, with coffee and that wired look he gets when he's pretending to be fine. When the ribbon-tying kid drifted over to him and explained, very solemnly, that you weren't allowed to climb the Geburtsbaum because the baby names get scared, he nodded like someone had delivered a legal opinion. On the way out, he fished a tiny screw from his pocket, where even did it come from, and used it to press our daughter's tag on the string tighter so it wouldn't slip. It was nothing. It knocked me sideways. The ultrasound was the next morning in a little clinic up 2 flights of stairs that smelled like disinfectant and boiled coffee. Alice lay back and grabbed my hand so hard my knuckles popped. The black and white world flickered on and there it was, a flicker inside a flicker, quick and stubborn. The sonographer turned the sound up and the room filled with a fast, underwater drum. I looked at Alice's face and watched every terrible story she'd been telling herself make room for this new, loud fact. Her husband cried without warning, just a crack down the middle and water everywhere, and tried to laugh it away and only made it worse. He said sorry properly after, to both of us, in a stairwell that smelled like someone's lunch, for the text in the car and the way he'd made their home smaller because he was afraid. He didn't make excuses. He said, please help me not be an idiot about this, and if there is a sentence that makes you ridiculously soft against your better judgment, it's that. He's still him. He still dropped off another paper for me to sign the next day like a dog proudly presenting a stick he stole from your own garden. But when Alice had a wave of cramps 2 days later, scary in the moment, normal by medical standards, he called me, not to outsource, but to say, I'm taking her in now, can you meet us? And I said yes and we became a tiny convoy with hazard lights ticking like metronomes in my chest. She was fine. We ate hospital vending machine waffles in a corridor and I felt 85 and 20 at the same time. In the middle of all this, the seat upholstery fairy godmother messaged again. I handed the number to Alice's husband and stepped all the way back. He handled it. 2 days later he sent me a photo of his car with seats that looked like they were designed for a yacht and a caption that just said wipeable. He still doesn't like driving it. He has started referring to it, under his breath, as the scene of the incident, which I find so theatrical I can't even be mad. The class lady runs a car seat safety afternoon, so we went. Picture a row of grown adults installing plastic thrones into a procession of vehicles while a patient woman with a laser pointer tells you that the belt path is not a suggestion. When she got to ours, she looked at my baby, then at Alice, then at me, and said, we do not give out medals for doing it the exciting way. My wife asked 207 questions about tethers and load legs and took notes like there would be a final exam. Alice practiced clicking and unclipping until the movement went into her bones. Her husband showed up halfway through with the wrong brand of snacks and a face that said he knew it and would take the hit. He lifted my daughter out while I tightened a strap and held her like she was made of glass and gravitational pull. She threw up on his shoulder, comprehensively. He laughed, actually laughed, horrified and delighted, and said, okay, like the floor finally told him its name. We still haven't signed the amicable arrangement because our insurer found 2 sentences they want changed and Belgium thrives on precision like other countries thrive on sunshine. It'll happen. The world did not end. Alice asked if I would come to her next midwife appointment and maybe to the hospital tour, and I said yes, and she said, my brain is being less dramatic, and we both sat there in the car for a minute not saying the thing about how a brain that has seen a baby arrive on a Wednesday in a passenger seat is allowed to be dramatic for a while. The last weird thing, because I think this story is committed to being a box of strange cards you pull at random. A week after the tree, we got a letter from the city offering us, no joke, a commemorative parking placard for young families, the kind that lets you take the mother and baby spots in certain lots if you flash it on your dashboard. The top line had our daughter's name and then, under birthplace, the same ridiculous, comforting truth. My wife stuck it next to the insurance paperwork in our drawer of adulthood and kissed the back of my head like punctuation. I took a picture of the Geburtsbaum on my phone on the way back from the shop yesterday. Someone had already tied a new ribbon. The tree looks silly. It looks perfect. Alice texted me a photo of a pair of baby socks hardly bigger than walnuts and asked if it's normal to want 10 pairs. I told her it's normal to want the whole shop. She sent back a car emoji and a heart and then, seconds later, just heartbeat. I don't think I'll ever get tired of that word. Update 4. Belgium sent us another plot twist in a windowed envelope with a grainy little photo of Alice's husband's car mid-zip, date stamped the day my daughter arrived. 63 and a 50, owner liable unless owner can produce a magical scroll. He texted me a picture of it with just? And my stomach did that cartoon elevator drop because of course that's what needed to exist, proof we were in a hurry to the place we never reached. I called our insurer. I called the midwife. I called the number on the ticket and got a woman who sounded like she files her pens by height. She told me I could submit context. Belgium loves context almost as much as it loves stamps, so I printed the certificate within a vehicle, street, on it, and Alice met me at the police station with a hand still shaky from decaf. Her husband came too, in a coat that tried to be more relaxed than he was. The desk officer had that deadpan patience of someone who knows the exact weight of a Tuesday. I slid the papers over and said, "This is so stupid it might be interesting?" He squinted, then his face did something I can only describe as a smile that forgot it was a smile. "In a vehicle," he read, and then he turned his computer around and showed us the time on the ticket, 20 minutes before the certificate timestamp. "You were trying." "Good," he said, and opened a digital form cheerfully called Bijzonder He dictated as he typed. "Urgent medical transport, driver was not the owner, owner did not encourage or instruct excessive speed, owner is going to have a baby in the family, congratulations to the owner." He asked Alice to sign under witness, and my pen made the dotted line feel like a bridge I'd been walking toward for weeks. We don't know yet if it'll be a warning or a token fine, but we walked out into a square that had decided to be sunny, and he put his hand on the bonnet like he was greeting an old dog and said, "To the car and maybe to me, okay." It sounded like a truce he believed this time. The hospital tour was 2 days later at 6 p.m., which is the exact hour every corridor in Belgium starts to smell like soup. The midwife led us past posters of babies wrapped like burritos and into a delivery room that looked indecently well lit. Alice was holding herself in that careful way you hold glassware, but her voice stayed inside her body. The midwife pointed out call buttons and where the towels live and the chair for fainting men. "This is where we make it boring," she said, and I watched that sentence snake into Alice's spine and settle. My wife asked questions that could get you a degree. Parking. Triage buzzers. The number you call if the number doesn't pick up. The midwife grinned at her like she was an honorary staff member. At admissions, a clerk with a leopard print scarf typed support person too? And mispronounced my surname with a flourish, and then handed over laminated visitor cards as if they were backstage passes. Alice's husband signed the form that put me in the room if policy allows. He didn't even grandstand it. He just wrote my name with the same careful, grown-up handwriting he uses on warranty cards and slid the pen back without the part where he performs his generosity. I almost cried on an ugly plastic chair. We did a dry run to the hospital on a Sunday morning when the city was half asleep, my wife navigating like she was born knowing ring roads. We took the exact same route we'd taken the day that wasn't a plan, turned onto the same stupidly ordinary street, and pulled over right beside the in-a-vehicle coordinates. The pavement was absolutely nothing to look at. Cicadas of passing bikes clicked by. A man walked a dachshund in a sweater. Alice pressed her palm flat to the car door and said, in the smallest voice, "Not today." Her husband popped the boot and showed us a tote, 2 towels, a bottle of water, a phone charger, a packet of those dreadful dry biscuits Belgians keep for tea in emergencies. He said, "Nerd kit," and it was a joke, but also not. We stood there until boredom roosted on our shoulders. Then we went for pastries too fancy for our level of sleep. Belgium crashed into itself again in the form of a community first aid night held in a badminton hall that smelled of rubber and earnestness. A paramedic with forearms like biography chapters announced the agenda: adult CPR, infant CPR, what to do until we get there, and at the end he tacked on and for the statistically unlikely, when a baby decides the car is fine. He said it like he'd been saving it. He asked for towels. Everyone laughed. He told us exactly where to pull over and why your hazards are not a force field and, crucially, that if you call 112 and say pregnant, pushing, a voice will walk you through the world, step by step, without asking you to be a hero, because that's their thing. Alice breathed like someone had oiled a hinge. Her husband stuck up a hand and asked if there was any scenario for red light discretion, and the paramedic gave him a look that was both don't and I get it, and said, "If it's happening now, stop the car. We come to you." On the way out, my daughter chose his shoulder for a second baptism, and for the second time he laughed instead of flinched, and said, "She's going to do that in my good shirt one day, isn't she?" Which is progress in a sentence. The insurance amicable arrangement finally shapeshifted into actual paper. My wife, who has a crush on stationery, booked us into a notary's office with green lamps and a view of a tram stop. We initialed more times than should be legal. Our insurer had 1-2 sentences about unforeseeable onset and no admission of fault, and then we all shook hands like the end of a sports match where nobody understood the rules but everyone still pretended they'd enjoyed it. Alice's husband exhaled so hard he wobbled. Later he sent a photo of the trunk. The towel kit had grown a friend. 2 towels, the caption said, like he'd discovered redundancy all by himself. The Jemmy Entihuis wasn't finished with us. An email arrived with an apologetic subject line: our daughter's Eid couldn't print because the database choked on in a vehicle as a birthplace code. Could we come in and select a municipality for software reasons, while keeping the note on the record for the human ones? We went on a rainy Thursday. The same clerk from the first time, hair in a clip the size of a crab, apologized like she'd personally offended my child. She showed us the drop-down list, which did not include passenger seat. We chose the district that owns the street because it felt the least like a lie. The note stays, she promised, typing fast enough to fight an itch. The printer jammed on the first try and coughed out a half card that said my daughter's name as if she were a password. On the second go, the machine sighed, conceded, and spat out the tiny plastic square that will someday unlock lockers and buses and, if my child is wild like her mother's, terrible clubs. Under Jibo or Teplotz it said the district. The clerk flipped the screen around to show the extra text box, where it still said exactly what makes my whole chest loosen. Inane Vorchuig, Street. She winked like conspirators do in mid-budget heist movies and slid the eat across the desk. Bureaucracy, but make it tender. Alice had her 12-week appointment and then the 13-week scan and then, because Belgium likes patterns, a standard letter about a combined test that managed to be both kind and terrifying. We took turns holding the cold gel bottle in our hands to warm it up while the sonographer found the angle where the baby looked like a gummy bear sucking its thumb. We all shut up at the same time without having to be asked. On the way down the stairs, her husband stopped and said, "If you faint, I'll sit on the fainting chair and not make it about me," and Alice laughed so loudly a nurse poked her head around a door to see if we were trouble. It was an remarkable morning. We did a silly little thing because we needed to do a silly little thing. We went back to the street one evening with a thermos and a pack of speculoos and sticky tape and tied a small ribbon around the no parking sign at exactly the line with the oil stain we both think we recognize. It wasn't a memorial. It was a joke only we would get. The ribbon flapped in the wind like a secret. A cyclist rang his bell at us in a tone that was very Brussels, polite outrage, and we grinned like kids caught chalking their own names on their own pavement. There was, because the universe likes a callback, an email from the local paper. A journalist asked if we'd be willing to do a follow-up about community care after that unusual event, and offered to blur faces and use only initials. We said no. We said, thank you. We said we were boring now, on purpose. She wrote back a smiley that looked disappointed and wished us lots of boring. I want that cross-stitched. Alice sent me a photo yesterday of her fridge, a calendar with tiny penciled strawberries on the days she's felt less scared. I want more fruit, she wrote. At 4 a.m. my phone pinged with a video from her husband of our baby hiccuping in their living room while Alice timed her own hiccups by mistake and laughed so hard she snorted. Trial run, his caption said, and if anyone had told me 6 weeks ago that I'd smile at a man's text that included my child and his sofa, I would have told them to go lie down. We are not finished being weird, probably. Life has that energy now. But the weird keeps making room for the practical, and the practical is holding hands with the soft. The trunk has 2 towels. The form has my name. The ribbon is still there, whenever I walk past, smug under a gray sky. My daughter cooed for the first time in the kitchen while my wife put a post-it on a list called Boring Birth Plan and Alice pressed her hand flat to her own belly and said, I can do boring. And I believed her like a fact.